Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the GA Lean Body Podcast. I'm your host Brian Keane, sports nutritionist and strength and conditioning coach, here to help you with all things GA related fitness. Today's episode is another Q&A, so the February 2021 Q&A. So very similar to last month's episode, I've taken these questions from my GA email list. So if you've downloaded the GA Lean Body Guide, which is just a guide on some things that you can do to help your body composition and sporting performance for football, hurling, ladies football or camogie. But when you download that guide, which I'll actually link in today's episode, I forgot to link that in last month's episode in the show notes, you automatically become subscribed to my GA email list, and that's where I send out the question the day before I record this podcast, so you can send in your own questions based on what I can support you with, what I can serve you with, and then my assistant Gary does all the editing on that and picks the questions that we haven't covered in the past. So today's episode is going to be a Q&A format, so we'll jump straight in. Okay, first question comes in from Adam. Hey Brian, just with lockdown, people are running more on the roads. Find the shin splints and tightness coming from the back of my calves becoming an issue. Any tips, stretches to prevent this? Also, the gyms are closed. What upper body exercises should I do? So I'll break this obviously into two parts because it's kind of two different questions. Shin splints are a little bit of a tricky injury, and for those of you who have chronic shin splints, i.e. it's something that you get bouts of every season, I would generally go to a sports specialist in terms of foot specialist, or a physio that's very well schooled in foot gait and running biomechanics, because when you're getting chronic cases of shin splints, it can be that there's an issue with the pronation of your foot, it can be that there's an issue with an imbalance elsewhere in your body through your muscular system, through your kinetic chain, and shin splints are just the body part that are taken, or shin splints is the injury that's coming up from that body part being inflamed from the way that you're running. Roads tend to be a lot worse, and the reason that roads can make shin splints worse, or if you have a history of knee or ankle issues, you can find that the road and the hard ground is a lot more problematic than, say, running on sand or running in the grass. And that's because of the impact. Every time you hit the road, there's no real give in the road. So every step and every run, every jog, every sprint on tarmac or on hard road is just sending your body's getting that vibration all the way through. And with that repeated banging, you can get so much inflammation in the parts of your body that are already particularly pre-existed injuries, or in the case of your pronation of your foot, potentially, you can get shin splints. And there's a few things you can do to fix this. Now, as I said, if you have a chronic issue with this where you're getting bouts with it every year, I would definitely go to a specialist. But if you're finding it's just now with lockdown and you're running on the roads, sometimes shin splints are actually very easy to fix. And I'm going to name a few things now, and I'd run through that checklist in order, because that can fix it very fast and can ease any issues that you have in that area. So the first thing is going to be your shoes. So the footwear that you're running in. If you're struggling with shin splints, in 8 out of 10 cases from my experience, either with people on my GA Lean Body program or people on my other BKF Online program, which is not sports specific, it's more body composition specific, but some people are runners on that program. In 8 out of 10 cases or 7 out of 10 cases, shin splints will go away with the correct footwear, meaning that if you have a good supported shoe or a neutral shoe, if that's what you need, that's going to support your run on even hard ground. So for example, I used to get really bad shin splints, and I still do if I don't use the correct footwear. So for me, I have a very slight pronation, particularly on my right foot, and I need a little bit of stability and a little bit of arch support when I run. So I use the Asics GT 2000s to run. Again, that's not a recommendation. That's the shoe that works for me and is the one that ensures that I don't get issues when I run on the road, particularly when I'm training for marathons or ultra marathons, etc., the endurance style events that I do now. But if I run a 10 kilometer run or a 15 kilometer run or even a 5K in a pair of unsupported Nikes, like my shins and my knees and my ankles, everything tends to get sore because I'm not giving myself the support I need. So I would look at your footwear first and foremost. The next thing then is I would look at your calves and your tightness in your calves. So I'm a little bit hesitant to say that calf tightness causes the problem, although it does, but it can be a case that you're fixing the problem versus getting to the root. And the reason I bring this up is in some cases, if you have very tight calves, your soleus, your gastrocnemius, the two muscles making up your calf, if they're really tight, that's going to put a little bit of extra strain through your shins. And it's a very common issue where people with tight calves will get shin splints. But sometimes rolling out your calves and getting some either deep tissue or a massage gun or a foam roller, particularly like a rumble roller, one of the harder foam rollers, getting that into your calves on both sides, your soleus and your gastrocnemius, that can relieve a lot of the tension and shin splints can go away, particularly if you have to do it before a run or directly after if you plan to run 2 days in a row. But also, it's worth adding that problem can be coming from another root issue, i.e. you have a weakness in your hamstrings or you have a lack of activation in your glutes and there's a problem with your kinetic chain and all it's manifesting itself in tight calves, which is giving you shin splints. So I want to kind of cover all bases just because it's not this is the problem, fix this and it goes away like, a lot of other answers can be. You have to look at it kind of holistically when it comes to shin splints and calf tightness in general, and stretches then are very similar. You put it on a point of stretch, so a standard calf stretch, but generally if you have a need to break down some of that scar tissue from increased inflammation over time, especially if you've been playing GA for years, you're probably going to have a little bit of that scar tissue built up in your calves, so you'll have to break it down with something more, deep tissue, a roller, etc. Stretching may not be enough, but look at it holistically. Look at your shoes, look at your muscle tightness, and then just look at your overall lifestyle in general. Like what you'll find with injuries is if you're tired, if you're run down, injuries and your shin splints particularly can flare up more so than if you're high energy and feeling good. Not always the case, but in my experience with some of the players I've worked with in the past, that can be a problem that they find if they've had a poor night's sleep and then they go for a run the next day, they're like, oh, my shin splints or my knee or my ankle's killing me. And I'm like, that's because your body's tired. So looking at your entire recovery protocol, your sleep, your nutrition, your training loads, your recovery protocols, all things I've covered on previous podcasts, I just wanted to add that as well because sometimes if you're feeling tired and run down, which is probably unlikely with the lockdown situation, but it's still worth adding for when things go back to normal, which they will at some point, that if you're feeling run down and feeling tired, you're at a higher risk of injury anyways, but also your perception of pain tends to reduce. So those injuries can feel a lot worse. I know I have a history of knee injuries. I've had 3 knee surgeries, and if I was out on a night out or I went drinking the night before and I tried to play a game or train or work out the next day, my knee would throb. So there's a little bit of anecdotal and first-hand experience there as well. When it comes to the gyms being closed and upper body exercises to do, again, it's goal specific. So your goals are going to be different, Adam, from Patrick's, from Declan's, from Mary's, from Jane's. They're different goals. But what I will say, ones that'll have a good bang for your buck with body composition and strength for GA is your compound lifts. So bench press, a military press or an overhead military press, pull-ups or rows. Like those upper body exercises that you can do with minimal equipment will be very, very good. If you have no equipment, you'll use movements like one of the things we created for the GA Lean Body program for the upcoming lockdown program is the home HIIT workouts, which will give you some of these moves or give people some of these moves that they can do that mimic or their movement patterns. They mimic the movement patterns of those movements without actually having to use any extra weight. So variations of push-ups, so spider push-ups, chest tap push-ups, mimicking that bench press move, but with your body weight. Pull-ups, you're going to be doing versions of inverted rows. If you have options for inverted rows, especially if you have a barbell, you can use that and hook it to something and hook it in between 2 chairs and do inverted rows. For military overhead press, you can do pike push-ups, which is effectively where you put your body into a V position, and another word for them or another name for them is shoulder push-ups, where you're pushing through your shoulders. So those movements work really well. If you can get your hands on a barbell or some dumbbells, you're not going to have any problem building upper body even without the gym. Like if you can get a decent amount of weight where you're able to perform those movements, or a pull-up bar. Pull-up bars are only about 10, 15, 20 euro, depending on where you get them. Or you have somewhere at home that's strong enough to pull yourself up. Disclaimer, be mindful that it's somewhere that'll hold your body weight. But if you have something that'll pull yourself up, you can use that. And they're kind of the king of upper body movements. Pull-ups, rows, bench press, military press, and then body weight equivalents if you don't have any access to weights. Next question comes in from Patrick. If you're inclined to struggle in the strength anaerobic side of things, would a CrossFit style workout be suitable to help build the anaerobic capacity while hitting strength requirements, doing an AMRAP or every minute on the minute? So yes and no. As I talked about previously on this podcast, it's not that CrossFit is good or bad for GA players. It's asking yourself, what are you comparing it to? And when it comes to building strength and anaerobic, so AMRAP is as many rounds as possible or as many reps as possible depending on the workout, which might look like you do 10 push-ups and 15 pull-ups and you do as many reps as possible for a total of 15 minutes. Or every minute on the minute would be equivalent. You do 10 push-ups, 10 squats, and you do it every minute on the minute for 15 minutes, for 20 minutes, etc. So that's what those workouts would look like. They're kind of CrossFit 101 in terms of some of the parameters that they use for their workouts. And the answer stands true to what I've said in the past. It depends what you're comparing CrossFit workouts to. If you're comparing it to a powerlifting workout, CrossFit style is going to be a better workout for strength and aerobic side of things because it's going to hit that angle and hit those parameters more so than a powerlifting program. Is it better than an S&C program that's specifically designed towards your goals? Also, the answer in that case is no. Something that's specific towards your goal is always going to be a better option regardless of what that goal is. So if your goal is to build strength in the anaerobic side of things and that's your primary focus, taking body composition even out of it, then you would design a program that's got some direct strength work. So maybe a 5x5 program and then maybe some metabolic conditioning style workout at the end for the anaerobic. So you pick a push-up and a squat and you either do a AMRAP or an every minute on the minute, or you just do a keep it simple, 20 reps of squats, 20 reps of push-ups, and you do it for 4 rounds and you only rest as needed. So there's lots of different ways to skin that cat when it comes to building strength and aerobic and an aerobic side of things. What I will say about CrossFit is if you enjoy it and it's not impacting your performance negatively, then I say have at it, especially this time of year with a little bit of uncertainty around the season when it's going to come back. And if you enjoy different styles of training, now is probably the time to experiment with it. I'm not a big fan of CrossFit during the season. I think the load is way too high. The risk of injury is too high. There's too much muscular load for the most part, which has a negative impact on either performance or recovery and can negatively impact your performance during the season. So in most cases, I'm not a fan of CrossFit in season for GA players. It's just because it will improve your overall fitness. It will improve a little bit of strength for sure because you're doing workouts that are, for the most part, high volume if it's a metabolic conditioning, or high weight if it's just a strength workout. And if it's Olympic lifts and you can perfect those forms, you're going to have a great crossover with performance in terms of those movements, even though to perfect an Olympic lift could take 6, 12, 18, 24 months. They're very, very difficult moves to master. Easy moves to kind of get going and get moving with, but to master them is quite a difficult feat and can take quite a long portion of time. If you have that interest and you have that dedication to it, by all means, you will get a good bang for your buck on the pitch if you can master a snatch and master different Olympic movements. But when it comes to CrossFit in general, at this point in this stage of the year, my advice is probably different because of the uncertainty. I would say focus on your secondary goals now. Focus on things you enjoy. If you're not signed up to a program, if you're not working with me on the upcoming GA Lean Body program, if you're not working with another coach or another trainer and you're just doing kind of a minimum effective dose with your club or whoever it is that you're training with, and you want to do something else that just kind of keeps your head sane for the next couple of months until you get confirmation on when the season is going to return, then now is probably a good time to do it. But when it comes to the strength and anaerobic side, again, it comes back to what you're comparing it to. But if you enjoy it and it's something you like doing and it's not increasing your risk of injury and it's not having a negative impact on other areas of your life, i.e. your recovery and your S&C or your strength and conditioning or your performance, if you're doing some pitch work yourself, then I would probably include it. But just be safe in the knowledge that, again, it's always going to be the comparison point. If you're comparing it to an S&C strength and conditioning style program that's specific towards your goals, it's not going to be as good. If you're comparing it to something like a bodybuilding program or a powerlifting program, it's probably going to be a little bit better just because there'll be more crossover than there would in those direct programs of hypertrophy for bodybuilding or powerlifting and 1 rep maxes on deadlift, etc. So just keep that in mind and hopefully that helps. The next question comes in from Declan. Hey Brian, my question, how would you structure your week of running to be ready for football when it returns? Are we better doing shorter runs, longer runs, or a mixture of both? Is tempo running, length of fields runs a good way of going about this, Declan? So what I'll say here, Declan, I know there's a lot of people in the same boat that are trying to do the running side of things to just stay on top of physical fitness, aerobic fitness ahead of whenever the season returns. So what I'd say here is there's two trains of thought. One is that you do a mixture of both that gives you the best of both worlds, which is a very effective tool, and I'll expand on that in a minute. And the alternative is similar to what I talked about in either, I think it was last month's podcast or possibly the month before, that you work off a pyramid of prioritization, i.e. you struggle with sprints, so you prioritize and you do an 80-20 split, so that most of your training is geared around the area that you're weaker on and you need to improve on. So what that would look like is, let's say you're a very good long distance runner. You've got quite good slow twitch muscle fibers. You're, and always have been for as long as you can remember, pretty good at long distance running. You know, long distance is relative, but the laps of the pitch, 5K runs, etc. But you struggle with sprints. So in that case, there's an argument that you would put more specific training into your sprints. So you would do variations of sprints, 20-meter sprints, 50-meter sprints, even 100-meter sprints, where you're doing variations of that, or shuttle runs with sprints in between, so that you're trying to improve that area of your game, knowing that you do one long run a week or one longer distance run a week, that's going to kind of keep things ticking over because you don't need that much work in that area, but you might do 3 or 4 workouts that are all sprint based. The flip would work then for somebody that is very good with fast twitch muscle fibers. They're very fast, very good with sprints, but really struggle with the longer distance stuff and just want to build up that area of their fitness. Then they might flip it where they're doing multiple 3, 4 longer distance runs or laps of pitches, and they're doing 1 or 2 short bursts to just stay on top of that side. So that's one angle you can approach it from. The other is you do the mixture of both, and that is kind of a casting a wider net. And when it comes to specific examples with people I work with directly, I would normally say one or the other of the prior that I've just mentioned. When it comes to a best practice overall for, you know, the hundreds, the thousands of you that are listening to this podcast, it's very much down to what will serve the most amount of people, and that's the mixture of both. So one of the things that I found very useful, and it again needs zero equipment, and if you have access to your local GA pitch or that's within your 5K or anything along those lines, again, I'm not even sure what the restrictions are with local pitches at the minute, but that could change by the time this podcast goes out. And what I would say there is something that can work quite well is, I think it's called the Mexican Mile. I'm not even sure if that's the correct term for it, but that's what we used to do in college when we were trying to improve our fitness in the off season. And what that looks like is that you jog the corners of the pitch and you sprint, or you jog the long portion of the pitch, so from one goal to the other, and then you sprint the sides. Or if you're fitter, you do that in reverse, where you sprint from goal to goal, but then you jog the sides. So if you picture the rectangle of a pitch, of a GA pitch, if you're at a higher level of fitness, you're going to have a jog from behind the goal from one side to the other, and then you're going to sprint from one length of the pitch to the other, then you jog the corner, and then you do that multiple times, normally 8 rounds, 10 rounds based on your level of fitness. And then if you're coming from a poorer starting point, you reverse that, where you sprint the sides and then you jog the distance, you jog the length of the pitch. So that's a nice little workout that you can add in that can be useful for staying on top of both. But again, it depends on where you need the most work. You will cover and hedge your bets doing that, or a version of that at home in a field, or, you know, in a local playground or wherever it is. You can mimic that. But what I would advise generally is you get specific on where you need to improve the most and then focus on that, but just be mindful that the alternative works as well if you're just trying to cover your bets. So when football returns, you'll be ready. And the fact that you're asking this question and you're doing a little bit of work is a good starting point, because you're asking good questions based on what you can do to improve ahead of the new season whenever it is that starts. And there's just some tips and tricks and a potential workout that you could do that will help you stay on top of your running over the coming weeks, over the coming months. Next question, which is very similar to the last one, but I do want to expand on one extra point, and it comes in from Fionn. Hey Brian, what sort of running do you recommend for GA players in the off season? So very similar to what I talked about earlier, you would identify what needs the most improvement, but another alternative is that you incorporate running on top of whatever strength and conditioning or main primary program you're doing. So the reason I wanted to kind of piggyback these two answers together, or merge and segue these two answers together, is because running is an important component, obviously, of GAA. It's one of the main methods of movements. You're sprinting, you're running, you're jogging, etc. But there are other secondary areas that you probably need to improve on as well. And although the temptation is just to focus on running now, particularly with lockdown and a lack of equipment, I wouldn't let that come at the cost of other potential strength work you could be doing, even if it means you're just using your body weight resistance. So one of the things, and I'll give you a sample of what we've added into the GA Lean Body program now, is high intensity interval trainings that merge with runs. So based on the individual, it obviously changes based on whether they do sprints or whether they do longer distance runs. Most start with the longer distance runs, and then we adapt it and change it as we go along. But the HIIT workouts look like S&C style movements within a high intensity interval training parameter. So what that will look like is things like jumping split squats, or plyometric push-ups, or squat jumps, or reverse lunges, all movement patterns that are directly going to benefit your body composition, directly going to benefit your overall strength levels, and it's going to improve your physical fitness. But they're movements that are specific towards what you would be doing in a set GA program, particularly my GA Lean Body program. But any S&C coach will give you kind of similar movements. And if it's body composition element as well, again, you'll have a kind of a crossover there too. But you'd have those movement patterns, and you're doing them as if you were doing a high intensity workout, like one of my YouTube workouts or the Body Coach workouts or multiple other people who do HIIT workouts. But you're doing them specific for GA. So they're S&C style moves within a HIIT parameter. So what I would advise and consider doing is something like those workouts. You might pick 10 S&C moves, and you might do a minute on each one, and then you might do a finisher altogether. I normally stick with kind of core-based finishers just because there's a lot of crossover and a lot of benefit for GA players when it's a core-specific finisher. So something like, a plank to push up on Tabata, where you do 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, and you do a total of 8 rounds for 4 minutes, and you finish your workout that way, and then you go for a 3-kilometer run, or then you go for a 5-kilometer run. That can be a very effective program merging to get the best of all worlds with limited equipment. So what I'd say there is, although I recommend running, what I talked about earlier with the question with Declan about, potentially doing a Mexican mile or doing a sprint-based primary program with one long run, or flipping that, where you do one long run and multiple sprint sessions. But don't neglect other areas as well. If you have access to weights, if you have access to dumbbells, if you have access to pull-up bars, even better. You'll be able to do even more movements and exercises than you would with just your body weight alone. So what I'd say with running, what I recommend, definitely listen back to what I said on Declan's question. I would apply that. But also, Fiona and anybody else in a similar boat, don't make running your only focus over the coming weeks and coming months, whether that's my program, whether that's with another coach, whether that's designing your own one that's got some bodyweight moves or potential weights or kettlebells, whatever equipment you have. Don't let running be the only thing that you do, because that can be the temptation now with lockdown, because you're like, well, I know how to run. I don't really have to think too much about that. And it may not give you the best bang for your buck in what is an extended off season right now. So just look at your training holistically, and that will support you over the next few weeks and the next few months. And you'll have a better bang for your buck when you actually get back into preseason and back into the full season, because you weren't focusing primarily and only on running during the whole lockdown period. Next question comes in from Keen. Hey Brian, is it a good idea for GA players to take zinc supplements? Like every supplement, it depends on the player. It depends on the athlete. It depends on the person. And I'm a big fan of zinc supplements generally, and I'll expand why and who I think should take them. But equally, zinc, like every supplement, is an absolute waste of money if you're getting it from your nutrition and you're getting it from your diet, or you're not deficient in it. So when it comes to supplements are there to supplement, inverted commas, supplement what you're missing in your nutrition. So for example, zinc supplements for people who are vegan can be very effective, especially vegans who don't consume a lot of pumpkin seeds. So if you're eating foods that aren't very naturally highly occurring in zinc, you don't eat a lot of oysters, you don't eat steak, you don't eat a lot of pumpkin seeds, there's a good chance that, or you're not eating any other zinc-rich foods, there's a good chance that you're going to be deficient in zinc, meaning that you're going to get a disproportionate benefit to adding that supplement in because you're missing it from your nutrition. And what zinc can do is, one, it's an immune-supporting supplement, fantastic immune supporter for anyone that's getting sick. I generally increase my dose of zinc anytime I'm feeling run down, but it also serves as a precursor for testosterone, meaning that If you have insufficient levels of zinc in your body's not going to be as efficient at producing testosterone. And, I've covered testosterone in the past in the podcast, all the benefits of it in terms of, sexual function, overall well-being, aggression, potentially muscle building, all of the positives that testosterone can have. Especially if you're deficient, you would notice those negative effects very quickly. And what I'd say with a zinc supplement is if you're deficient, you should probably add it in. And there's a few ways to know if you're deficient. One is obviously the trial and tested. You get it checked. You go to your doctor and you get your zinc levels checked, or you use someone like Let's Get Checked, which is who I use for my blood work. I'll put a link for Let's Get Checked below. I have an affiliate code with them as well for anyone that wants to use them. There's 30% off on any of their orders, but you can go on and check your zinc levels, or you can check your testosterone levels on there. And what that will do is it'll give you feedback on, right, you're deficient, you need to supplement X, Y, or Z amount back into your diet or as a supplement in order to keep your levels balanced and adequate so that your body can perform at its best. So that's one way. That's the trial and tested way of going about it. You go to your doctor or you get a test done yourself. The other way is that you look at your nutrition. And somebody that's a nutritionist or a dietitian, my background in sports nutrition, so it's very easy for me to spot, not necessarily very easy for everyone else, so I'll expand on this, is if you look at someone's nutrition, you can spot if they're probably going to be deficient in zinc, i.e. they're not eating zinc-rich foods. If I see a sample food list of foods somebody is eating, I can spot it very quick if they're deficient in, omega-3, or if they're very deficient or probably potentially deficient in zinc. You can tell from looking at a plan. I'm like, there's no zinc-rich foods there. It's a good chance you're deficient in it. And then the third option is based on potential side effects or negative effects. So some of the negative effects of being zinc deficient will be getting sick a lot, so an immune system that just isn't operating optimally. Another one would be a low sex drive, where you don't really have any major desire to have sex. Another would be just an overall general well-being, poor feeling of well-being. You don't feel great. But the problem with using that methodology to identify if you should use zinc is it can be a case of lots of different factors can contribute that. You could have low sex drive for another reason, inadequate vitamin D, poor lifestyle, too much cortisol. You could have a poor immune system from, something that your body's trying to fight off, or again, an increased level of cortisol or poor recovery in general. So there's other things that can cause it. So that's my least favorite way of identifying if you'll benefit from a supplement, but it is a method nonetheless, so I wanted to add it. So what I'd say here is, if you think you'll benefit from a zinc supplement, you should probably consider using it. But like every supplement, if you don't need it, it's at worst dangerous and toxic to the body, same with any vitamin or mineral if you take too much, and at best a waste of money. So you do want to be a little bit mindful of the supplements you take and being very aware that they do and can cause or pose potential risks if you don't need it. And as I said, at the worst it can be dangerous, and at the best it's a waste of money. So you kind of don't want to get caught on either sides of those spectrum. But there's some thoughts on it, and I apply that to every supplement. Vitamin D, vitamin C. I'd even go as far to say creatine and glutamine, supplements that are probably staples for people that's trying to build muscle, but trying to build strength, or balance or naturally boost their growth hormone or improve their immune function. In the case of glutamine, the same. There's context needed. Your nutritional plan, your recovery, your genetic history, all of those things will play a role in what supplements will benefit you the most. So I wouldn't kind of poke blindly or go blindly with supplement choices. I would look at either getting it tested from a doctor or Let's Get Checked, as I mentioned, the crowd who do my blood work, or I would consider working with a dietitian or a nutritionist, showing them your nutritional plan and they can have a look at it. Or you do the how am I feeling, and you run through the potential negative effects you have and ask, will zinc be a supplement that will potentially support me? They're kind of your three options from most robust to least, and that's how I would approach it when it comes to zinc, and that's how I would approach it when it comes to any supplement. So the next question comes in from Seamus. Brian, I'm struggling to get into a good sleeping habit, getting 8 hours a night, going at the same time, etc. Do you have any advice on how to get a good sleeping structure habit in place? So there's another podcast, I'll link it in today's show notes, that I did on the Brian Keane podcast with Nick Littlehills, who used to be Cristiano Ronaldo's sleep coach. Very interesting podcast. So I'll link that in the show notes because he's got multiple, and his book is fantastic. It's just titled Sleep. by Nick Littlehales. And he has lots of different theories on sleep, that you don't necessarily have to get the strict 8 hours, and you can incorporate different sleep strategies such as napping is what he talks about, that he applies with a lot of the top professional teams. He was also the sleep coach for the Manchester United treble winning team in 1999. So he's got a long history of working with athletes. So I'll link that in the show notes. I'd give that a listen after today's episode. But when it comes to getting your sleeping habit right, there's a few things that you want to look at. And the problem with sleep is you will fall somewhere on the spectrum of the head hits the pillow and you're out for the count, and on the other end of the spectrum where you need to have an entire routine in order to get a good night's sleep. And I fall on this bracket. I talked about this in last week's solo Q&A on my Brian Keane podcast, that I don't really think about my nutrition. I don't really think about my training. I've years of good habits with nutrition. Training, something I love doing with the exception of my longer runs, and it's something I'll do to the day I die. But if I don't look after my sleep hygiene and have a routine at nighttime, I have a terrible night's sleep guaranteed. Although I can sleep well now, that routine is something I have to focus on every night. And what I'll do is I'll share my routine, and then I'll expand on potential things to look at. So what my routine looks like is I try and go to bed every night at the same time, which can be quite tricky. I go to bed quite early, around 9 o'clock. So when you go to bed early, you're able to set a routine prior to that, and also it allows you to get up at the same time every day. And that can be a very important factor when it comes to improving sleep quality. So going to bed at random times and getting up at random times is literally like nuking your sleep in terms of its quality, just because your body can't get into any natural rhythm. So having a set structured bedtime and having a set structured wake up time within an hour or two, especially, I try and do 5 a.m. during the weeks. I do 7 a.m. at the weekends. I find that works quite well for me. Again, everyone has individual sleep requirements. Some people need 7 hours, some people need 8 hours, some people need 9 hours plus. It really varies person to person. So it's about finding your sweet spot and realizing that sleep requirements don't stay stagnant through your night. Like if you're on a new training program or an intense training program, you're going to need more sleep than if you've taken 3 or 4 rest days in a row. Your sleep requirements don't stay stagnant. Similar to your protein requirements, they don't stay stagnant. They vary and change based on what you're doing, based on your training program, based on a whole list of other factors. So what I'd say with that is get your timing right. And then when it comes to routine before bed, I try and have after 6 p.m. A little bit trickier with lockdown, even though I've kind of got back on top of it now over the last few months, is I don't go on any social media or do any work-related tasks after 6 p.m. So that 6 to 9 p.m. window is complete downtime, spending it with family, spending it with my partner, spending it with my daughter, watching something on TV. I'm normally rolling out or doing some form of stretching. It's just very downtime. There's no work, there's no phone, there's no social media. It's just, a 2 to 3 hour switch off where my brain knows that, the day's over, we're winding down now because we're going to be going to bed in a couple of hours. So I'll normally watch something on TV. I'll watch a match or Sky Sports, or I'll watch a movie or Netflix or something along those lines at some point, just to calm my brain down and get it used to being ready to, we're about to go to sleep now. You're not watching anything that's going to make you think too much. So I don't listen to business podcasts. I don't listen to anything that'll get my brain moving. So everyone has different versions of this, but that's what mine looks like. And I'll normally block out blue light then about 2 hours before bed. So I've got blue light blocking glasses. You can get those anywhere. I've got 2 sets. I've got one from Hinshaw Eyewear. I've got another one from Swannies online. I have a little bit more partial to the Swannies ones just because it's got an orange tint which can help block out blue light. And blue light is the light from your screen, from your TV, from your phone that can stop melatonin production. Melatonin is the hormone that will help your body start to unwind so that it can drop into sleep. Think of it like the opposite of cortisol. So cortisol is a stress hormone. That's what wakes you up in the morning, gets you out of bed. Melatonin is the opposite. It's the one that calms you down, gets you used to go to sleep. And if you're watching the TV or not blocking out that blue light with either an app or glasses, you're going to have an insufficient production of melatonin potentially, and that will negatively affect your sleep. Then after that, it's my sleep supplements. So I'm a big fan of CBD oil. So I use CBD, hemp heroes CBDs. A lot of you that follow my Instagram will have seen me post this up. I know some GA players are hesitant to use it, so just message David over at Hemp Heroes if it's something that you're hesitant to use for whatever reason. It's something that I use as an absolute staple, and I use magnesium. So either the Mag 365, which I get in evergreen, or I use the bio-optimizers, which I get online. I've had Wade T. Lightheart, the owner of bio-optimizers, on my other podcast as well, and he was talking about probiotics, digestion, sleep supplements, etc. So I'll take those supplements. They're kind of my staple. One of the things I've been doing recently now, just because of the uncertainty around COVID and a little bit more stress than normal with that complete unknown and uncertainty, I've been doing Epsom salts baths. Also, my workouts have been really hard with my runs. I've been trying to improve my 15-kilometer pace on my runs alongside my weight workouts. So my body's been really taking a beating over the last few months. So now I do an Epsom salt bath before bed. So just random Epsom salts that you can get in any chemist or pharmacy, and I'll throw 3-4 cupfuls into a hot bath, and then I'll do 10 minutes in that bath, and then I'll do a 2-minute cold shower, and that tends to work really well to just calming everything before I go to bed. So that's what my routine looks like. What I'll say here as a recommendation is there'll be things that I'm doing that will work, but you also have to experiment with what's going to work best for you. Generally, for the most part, having a routine that you go to bed at the same time every night, get up at the same time, where you block out blue light, where you use supplements that support you, whether that is magnesium, CBD oil, theanine, GABA, some of the ones from my book, they're the ones I've recommended in Leaner, Stronger, Faster, my book for GA players. You can use those supplements that potentially can help with sleep. Same with the Epsom salt baths. Things that affect your physiology will impact most human beings the exact same way. Whereas the example I used earlier for runs, it depends on your history, it depends on your genetics, it depends on your level of fitness. So you're not going to, and I generally don't give a one size fits all, because it shows you the range of answers that will be given based on the context. Whereas something like sleep that's based on human physiology, generally I can offer a lot more in the box answer that'll apply to most people. So following my routine will probably yield quite similar results to what I get. So what I'd say is look at where you're falling down. What's the issue? There's normally always a glaring one. You're going to bed at different times. You're getting up too late. There's a blue light issue. You're not relaxed before bed. You might need to do some meditation or a hot Epsom salt bath or something along those lines. Find some routine that you can stick to. And then when you find the things that are working, double down on them. Make note. I've tried so many variations. I've tried bed of nails, which is like an acupuncture mat before bed. Didn't work for me. I've tried journaling on different notepads and different daily journals and nighttime journals. Didn't work for me. So I've tried lots of different things, but that's not to say those things won't work. They might. It's a case of experimenting with all the extras, and what works, keep it, and what doesn't, get rid of it. But what I've given here, particularly with the exception probably of the supplements, which I think is a bit more individual to the person, everything else here should probably work for you, Seamus. So I would give it a go, and anyone else that's struggling with sleep, I would also try it. Again, based on how your body's responding, track and see how good you're sleeping. How do you feel in the morning? Don't use your watches, don't use things like that. They're just not accurate, but track how you feel. When you wake up in the morning, do you feel rested? Do you feel like you had a good sleep? You know, don't set multiple alarms, which is another thing for sleep quality. A lot of people will, myself included, I talk about this in my second book, Rewire Your Mindset. I used to set like 6 alarms. So if I had to get up at 6 a.m., I would set 6 a.m., 6:05, 6:10, 6:15, just so that I could snooze it. And that's one of the worst things you can do for cortisol. For one, because you're just getting repeated bouts of cortisol as your body goes into sleep and then wakes up again. But also it means that you're probably going to wake up feeling like a zombie because you're tired, and your body probably could have got up with the first alarm, but you set multiple after that. So they're just other little tips and tricks to consider. But check out the podcast with Nick Littlehales. Check out his book. Check out maybe the podcast I did with Ben Greenfield as well about ancestral sleep, about how to build your day around a good night's sleep. That's from the other podcast, the Brian Keane podcast. And between all of that and between what I've said here, hopefully that will address and fix your sleep issues, Seamus. So that's a wrap from today's episode. As always, if you want more information on my GA Lean Body program, I'll pop the information for that in the description for today's episode. The next one starts in early March. And yeah, looking forward to working with everyone who's already signed up for that. Anyone else that wants more details, as I said, just pop your email in there and you'll either join the waiting list or I'll send you over the number for how many places are left. That's everything from this month's episode. Catch you all next month.